The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty farmyard as 8-year-old Emma sat quietly on the wooden steps of the old farmhouse. Her small hands trembled as she picked at the frayed edges of her worn dress, listening to the angry voices echoing from inside the house. Uncle Marcus and Aunt Vera were arguing again, their harsh words cutting through the thin walls like sharp knives. Emma had been living with her uncle and aunt for 2 years now, ever since her parents died in a car accident on a rainy October night. She remembered that terrible day when the police officer came to her school and told her the news that changed everything. The kind teacher had held her while she cried, but nothing could fill the empty space her parents left behind. Uncle Marcus was nothing like her father. Where her dad had been gentle and patient, Uncle Marcus was cruel and quick to anger. He had a face like weathered leather, with deep lines carved by years of hard drinking and harder living. His eyes were cold and gray like storm clouds that never brought rain. Aunt Vera wasn't much better, though she pretended to care when other people were watching. The farm where they lived was isolated, miles away from the nearest neighbor. The house was old and falling apart, with peeling paint and broken shutters that banged in the wind. Behind the house stood several outbuildings, including an old corn crib that hadn't been used for storing grain in years. The wooden structure was small and dark, with gaps between the slats that let in thin streams of light during the day. Emma knew that corn crib well. It had become her prison whenever Uncle Marcus decided she had done something wrong. Sometimes it was for spilling milk at breakfast. Other times it was for not finishing her chores fast enough. Yesterday, she had been tied up in there simply because she had asked if she could call her grandmother, her mother's mother who lived 3 states away. The rope burns on her wrists were still red, and so from the last time. Uncle Marcus used rough hemp rope that cut into her skin when she tried to move. He would tie her hands behind her back and secure her to one of the wooden posts inside the crib. Then he would leave her there for hours, sometimes even overnight, with nothing but darkness and the sound of mice scurrying in the corners. Emma had learned not to cry out anymore. The first few times she had screamed and pleaded until her voice was hoarse. But no one could hear her way out there, and it only made Uncle Marcus angrier when he came back. Now she would sit in silence, counting the thin beams of light that filtered through the wooden slats, trying to remember her mother's lullabies to keep the fear away. The social worker, Mrs. Patterson, had visited once about 6 months after Emma arrived. Aunt Vera had put on her best dress and baked cookies, playing the part of the loving guardian. Uncle Marcus had cleaned himself up and spoke politely about how much they enjoyed having Emma with them. They had hidden the rope and cleaned out the corn crib, making it look like it was just used for storage. Emma had wanted to tell Mrs. Patterson the truth, but Uncle Marcus had pulled her aside before the visit and made his threats very clear. He told her that if she said anything bad about them, they would send her to an orphanage where things would be much worse. He described terrible stories about children who were never adopted and grew up alone and unwanted. At 8 years old, Emma believed every word. During the social worker's visit, Emma sat quietly at the kitchen table, answering questions with simple yes or no responses. When Mrs. Patterson asked if she was happy living there, Emma glanced at Uncle Marcus's stern face and nodded. The social worker seemed satisfied with what she saw and never came back. Life on the farm was hard, even without the punishments. Emma had to wake up before dawn to help with chores. She fed the chickens, collected eggs, and helped Aunt Vera with cooking and cleaning. Uncle Marcus made her work in the vegetable garden, pulling weeds under the hot sun until her back ached and her hands were blistered. When she wasn't working, she was expected to stay quiet and out of sight. School was Emma's only escape, but Uncle Marcus often kept her home when there was extra work to be done or when the marks from the rope were too visible. When she did attend, she was too tired and worried to concentrate on her lessons. Her teacher, Miss Rodriguez, had noticed the changes in Emma's behavior and grades, but when she tried to ask questions, Emma would just say she was fine. The other children at school had started to avoid her. Emma's clothes were always dirty and too small, and she often smelled like the farm animals. She didn't have friends to play with or visit, and she couldn't invite anyone to the farm. The isolation made everything worse, creating a world where Uncle Marcus and Aunt Vera's cruelty was all she knew. Emma often thought about running away, but where can an 8-year-old girl go? She had no money, no other family she could reach, and the nearest town was 15 miles away through fields and woods. Uncle Marcus had made sure she understood that the world outside the farm was dangerous for a little girl on her own. He told her stories about children who ran away and were never seen again. The worst part wasn't the physical pain or the hunger when they forgot to feed her. It was the loneliness that ate away at her spirit day by day. Emma felt like she was disappearing, becoming smaller and quieter until she might just fade away completely. She missed her parents so much it felt like a constant ache in her chest. Sometimes she would close her eyes and try to remember her mother's voice or her father's laugh, but the memories were getting harder to hold on to. On this particular morning, as Emma sat on the steps listening to another argument, she didn't know that her life was about to change forever. She couldn't see the dust cloud rising in the distance as a pickup truck made its way down the long dirt road toward their farm. She didn't know about the man behind the wheel, a rancher named Jack Sullivan who owned the property next to theirs. Jack had been meaning to talk to Marcus about the fence line between their properties. Some of Marcus's cattle had been getting through broken sections of fence and mixing with Jack's herd. It was a simple neighbor-to-neighbor conversation that needed to happen, nothing more. He had no idea what he was about to discover. As Jack's truck drew closer to the farmhouse, Emma wiped her eyes and stood up from the steps. She had learned to make herself invisible when strangers came around. Uncle Marcus didn't like her talking to other people, and she had been punished before for being too friendly with visitors. She started to slip around the side of the house to hide, but something made her pause. Maybe it was the gentle way the man parked his truck, not slamming the door like Uncle Marcus always did. Maybe it was the fact that he took off his hat before approaching the house, showing manners that Uncle Marcus never displayed. Or maybe Emma was just tired of being invisible, tired of pretending that everything was fine when her whole world was falling apart. Jack Sullivan was a tall man in his mid-40s with kind eyes and weathered hands that spoke of honest work. He had been ranching in the area for over 20 years and was known for his fair dealing and good character. He was divorced with no children of his own, living alone on his ranch with his horses and cattle for company. He had always been the type of man who helped his neighbors without expecting anything in return. As Jack walked toward the front door of the farmhouse, he noticed the little girl standing at the corner of the building. She looked thin and scared, with tangled blonde hair and clothes that had seen better days. Something about her appearance struck him as wrong, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly what it was. The child looked like she was ready to run at the first sign of trouble. Jack smiled and tipped his hat to Emma, but before he could say hello, the front door of the farmhouse burst open. Marcus stomped out onto the porch, his face red with anger and alcohol, even though it wasn't even noon yet. Vera followed behind him, wringing her hands nervously. The argument that had been going on inside the house had been about Emma, though Jack didn't know that yet. Marcus had been drinking since breakfast, getting himself worked up about having to feed and house his dead brother's kid. He had been complaining to Vera about the expense and the trouble, saying things that made even his hard-hearted wife uncomfortable. Marcus glared at Jack with unfriendly eyes, clearly annoyed by the interruption. He didn't bother with pleasantries or introductions, just demanded to know what Jack wanted. Jack explained about the fence issue, keeping his tone neighborly and calm despite Marcus's obvious hostility. While the two men talked, Jack's attention kept drifting to the little girl who was trying so hard to stay invisible. There was something about her posture, the way she held herself, that reminded him of injured animals he had found on his ranch. She had the same look of a creature that had been hurt and was expecting more pain. As Marcus grew more agitated during their conversation about the fence repairs, Emma began to back away toward the old corn crib. It was an automatic response, born from months of trying to stay out of Uncle Marcus's way when he was angry. She knew that when he got like this, it was only a matter of time before he found a reason to punish her. Jack noticed Emma's movement and felt a chill run down his spine. The way she moved toward that old building wasn't random. She was seeking a hiding place, but there was something more to it. The building itself looked ominous and abandoned, hardly the kind of place a child would choose to play. Unless it wasn't her choice at all. Jack's conversation with Marcus was cut short when the angry man noticed where Emma was heading. His face twisted with rage as he saw her near the corn crib, and he shouted at her to get back to the house immediately. The harshness in his voice made Jack wince, and he watched as the little girl froze in place like a deer caught in headlights. Marcus stomped toward Emma, his heavy boots making angry sounds on the dirt ground. Jack felt his stomach clench as he watched the interaction between the man and the child. Emma cowered as Marcus grabbed her roughly by the arm, his fingers digging into her thin shoulder. The little girl didn't cry out, which somehow made the scene even more disturbing. "I told you to stay inside when we have company." Marcus snarled at Emma, shaking her slightly. "You're always getting in the way, just like your worthless father." Jack had heard enough. Something deep inside him, an instinct honed by years of caring for vulnerable animals, told him that this situation was very wrong. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Hey now, Marcus, there's no need to be rough with the child," Jack said, making his presence known. She wasn't bothering anyone. Marcus turned his cold gray eyes toward Jack, his grip still tight on Emma's arm. "This is my family business, Sullivan. The girl needs to learn respect and discipline. Her parents spoiled her rotten before they died." The way Marcus spoke about Emma's deceased parents made Jack's blood boil, but he kept his expression neutral. He could see the fear in Emma's blue eyes, the way she held herself perfectly still to avoid making Marcus angrier. This wasn't normal discipline. This was something much darker. "Of course," Jack replied carefully. "I didn't mean to interfere. I was just thinking the little one might want to pet my horse while we finish talking about the fence. Kids usually like horses." Emma's eyes lit up for just a moment at the mention of a horse, but she quickly looked down at the ground again when Marcus's grip tightened on her arm. Marcus studied Jack's face suspiciously, trying to figure out if there was some hidden meaning behind the offer. "She's got chores to do," Marcus said finally. "Don't have time for her to be playing around with animals." Jack nodded as if he understood, but he was already forming a plan in his mind. He had dealt with difficult situations before, both with animals and people, and he knew that direct confrontation would only make things worse for Emma. He needed to be smart about this. "Well, maybe another time then," Jack said easily. "About that fence, though, I think it would be best if we walk the property line together so we can see exactly where the problems are. Would you mind taking a look with me now?" Marcus hesitated. He wanted to get rid of Jack as quickly as possible, but he also couldn't afford to have his neighbor's cattle mixing with his small herd. The fence repairs were something that actually needed to be done. "Fine, Marcus Matted." "But it won't take long." He released Emma's arm with a push that sent her stumbling backward. "You get in that house and help Vera with the washing," he ordered. "And stay there until I get back." Emma nodded quickly and hurried toward the house, but not before shooting a quick glance at Jack. In that brief moment, their eyes met, and Jack saw something that made his heart ache. It was a look of desperate hope mixed with crushing disappointment, as if she wanted to believe that someone might help her, but had learned not to trust and rescue. As Jack and Marcus walked toward the fence line, Jack kept the conversation focused on practical matters while his mind raced with thoughts about what he had witnessed. The way Marcus had grabbed Emma wasn't the behavior of a caring guardian. The child's obvious fear wasn't normal either. Jack had grown up on a ranch where discipline was important, but what he had seen went far beyond normal correction. The fence inspection took about an hour, with Marcus grudgingly agreeing to split the cost of repairs. Throughout their walk, Jack listened as Marcus complained about various things, including what a burden Emma was to him and Vera. He spoke about her like she was an unwanted animal they had been forced to take in, with no regard for the fact that she was a grieving child who had lost her parents. When they returned to the farmhouse, Jack made an excuse about needing to check something in his truck. What he really wanted was another look at Emma and the old corn crib that had caught his attention earlier. Something about that building bothered him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. As Marcus went back into the house, Jack took a moment to examine the corn crib more closely. It was an old structure, probably built 50 years ago or more. The wood was weathered and gray, with gaps between the slats that would let in light, but not much else. As he walked around it, Jack noticed something that made his blood run cold. There were rope marks on one of the wooden posts inside the crib. Fresh rope marks. And on the ground beneath the post, Jack could see small scuff marks in the dirt, the kind that might be made by someone's feet as they struggled or tried to get comfortable while sitting in one position for a long time. Jack's hands clenched into fists as the horrible truth began to dawn on him. The corn crib wasn't used for storing grain. It was being used as a prison for that little girl. The rope marks, Emma's fearful behavior, the way she had automatically moved toward the building when Marcus got angry, it all made sickening sense. Jack had to force himself to stay calm and think clearly. If he was right about what was happening here, Emma was in serious danger. But he couldn't just accuse Marcus without proof, and he couldn't call the police based on suspicions alone. He needed to be smart about this, for Emma's sake. As Jack walked back toward his truck, he saw Emma's face appear briefly in one of the farmhouse windows before quickly disappearing again. She was watching him, probably wondering if he had noticed anything unusual. Jack made a decision in that moment. He was going to help this little girl, no matter what it took. Over the next few days, Jack found reasons to drive past the farm. He told himself he was just checking on his cattle in the nearby pasture, but really he was watching for signs of what was happening to Emma. On the third day, his worst fears were confirmed. Jack had parked his truck behind a stand of trees where he could see the farmhouse without being easily spotted. It was late afternoon, and he watched as Marcus dragged Emma out of the house and toward the corn crib. Even from a distance, Jack could see that she was crying, though she wasn't making any sound. Marcus shoved Emma into the small building and emerged a few minutes later with a piece of rope in his hands. He looked around carefully, as if making sure no one was watching, before going back into the house. Emma didn't come out. Jack waited until dark before making his move. He knew that Marcus usually spent his evenings drinking heavily, and Vera typically went to bed early. The farmhouse was quiet except for the glow of a television through the front window. Moving carefully in the darkness, Jack made his way to the corn crib. His heart was pounding as he approached the old building, afraid of what he might find inside. He could hear quiet sniffling coming from within, the sound of a child trying not to cry. "Emma," Jack whispered softly through the wooden slats. "Emma, it's Jack Sullivan, the man with the truck who came by a few days ago." The sniffling stopped immediately, and Jack could sense Emma holding her breath. "Emma, I'm here to help you," Jack continued in the same quiet voice. "Can you tell me if you're hurt?" For a long moment, there was no response. Then, Emma's small voice came through the darkness, so quiet Jack had to strain to hear her. "You have to go away," she whispered. "If Uncle Marcus catches you here, he'll be really mad." Jack's heart broke at the concern in her voice. Even in her own desperate situation, she was worried about getting someone else in trouble. "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Jack said, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. "What your uncle is doing to you is wrong. It's against the law, and you don't deserve to be treated this way." "I've been bad," Emma replied, her voice thick with tears. "Uncle Marcus says I'm too much trouble, just like my daddy was." "That's not true," Jack said firmly. "You're a good girl who deserves to be safe and loved. Your uncle is lying to you." Jack could hear Emma moving slightly inside the crib, and he realized she was probably tied up and trying to get more comfortable. The thought made his anger burn hotter, but he forced himself to stay focused on helping her. "Emma, I'm going to get you out of here tonight," Jack said, "but I need you to trust me and do exactly what I tell you." "Can you do that?" There was another long pause before Emma answered. "What if he catches us?" she whispered. "He won't," Jack promised, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. "I'm going to make sure you're safe." Jack examined the corn crib carefully, looking for the best way to get Emma out without making noise. The old wooden door was secured with a simple metal latch, but Jack was worried about the hinges squeaking. He decided to try removing some of the wooden slats instead. Working slowly and quietly, Jack was able to loosen several of the vertical slats enough to create an opening. As he worked, he kept talking softly to Emma, telling her about his ranch and his horses, trying to keep her calm and distracted. When the opening was big enough, Jack carefully reached inside and found Emma sitting on the ground with her hands tied behind her back to one of the support posts. Her wrists were raw from the rope, and she was shivering in the cool night air. "It's okay now," Jack murmured as he gently untied the knots. "You're safe now." When a rope fell away, Emma immediately rubbed her sore wrists. Jack helped her crawl through the opening he had created, and when she stood up in the moonlight, he could see just how thin and pale she had become. "We need to move quickly and quietly," Jack told her. "My truck is parked down by the road. Can you walk okay?" Emma nodded, though Jack could see she was unsteady on her feet. He scooped her up in his arms, surprised by how light she felt. She wrapped her thin arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. As they made their way through the darkness toward Jack's truck, Emma began to tremble, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming realization that someone had finally come to help her. For the first time in 2 years, she felt a tiny spark of hope beginning to grow in her chest. Jack carried Emma through the darkness to his truck, her small body trembling against his chest. When they reached the vehicle, he gently set her down and opened the passenger door. Emma hesitated for a moment, looking back toward the farmhouse where she had lived in fear for so long. "It's okay," Jack said softly. "You never have to go back there again." Emma climbed into the truck, and Jack wrapped a warm blanket around her shoulders that he kept behind the seat. As they drove away from the farm, Emma stared out the window at the familiar landscape passing by in the moonlight. For the first time in 2 years, she was leaving that terrible place. "Where are we going?" Emma asked quietly, her voice still hoarse from crying. "First, we're going to the hospital to make sure you're okay," Jack explained. "Then, we're going to the police station so we can tell them what your uncle was doing to you." Emma's eyes widened with fear. "Will they send me back?" "No, sweetheart," Jack said firmly. "I promise you will never go back to that place. What your uncle did to you was wrong, and there are laws to protect children like you." The hospital visit was difficult for Emma. The doctors and nurses were kind, but she wasn't used to people touching her gently or speaking to her with caring voices. The examination revealed the full extent of her mistreatment: rope burns on her wrists and ankles, signs of malnutrition, and emotional trauma that would take time to heal. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the pediatrician who examined Emma, was shocked by what she found. In 20 years of practice, she had seen cases of child abuse, but the systematic cruelty that Emma had endured was heartbreaking. Dr. Martinez made sure to document everything carefully, knowing that this evidence would be important for the police investigation. At the police station, Detective Lisa Rodriguez handled Emma's case with special care. She was trained to work with traumatized children and knew how to ask questions in a way that wouldn't make Emma more frightened. Slowly and patiently, Detective Rodriguez helped Emma tell her story. Emma described the countless hours she had spent tied up in the corn crib, sometimes without food or water. She told about the beatings, the cruel words, and the constant fear that had become her daily life. Her small voice shook as she talked, but with Jack sitting beside her holding her hand, she found the courage to tell the truth. When Emma mentioned that Uncle Marcus had threatened to send her to an orphanage if she ever told anyone what was happening, Detective Rodriguez explained that there were good families waiting to adopt children like her. She told Emma about foster families who would take care of her while they found her a permanent home. "But what if they don't want me?" Emma asked, voicing the fear that had been planted in her mind by Marcus's cruel words. "Sweetheart," Detective Rodriguez said gently, "there are many families who would be honored to have a brave, sweet girl like you in their home." Jack had been quiet during most of Emma's interview with the police, but when Detective Rodriguez began talking about foster care, he spoke up. Detective Rodriguez, I'd like to apply to be Emma's foster parent, if that's possible. Everyone in the room turned to look at Jack in surprise. Emma's eyes grew wide, hardly daring to believe what she had heard. Detective Rodriguez explained the process of becoming a foster parent, including background checks, home inspections, and training requirements. Jack nodded seriously, understanding that protecting children required these safeguards. I know it won't be quick or easy, Jack said, but I want to do whatever it takes. Emma deserves a safe home with someone who cares about her. While the paperwork for Jack's foster care application was being processed, Emma was placed temporarily with the Morrison family, experienced foster parents who specialized in helping traumatized children. Helen and Robert Morrison had been fostering children for 15 years and had helped dozens of kids heal from difficult experiences. The Morrison home was everything that Marcus's farm was not. It was warm and welcoming, with comfortable furniture, children's books on the shelves, and pictures of smiling families on the walls. Helen Morrison was a gentle woman with gray hair and kind eyes who made Emma feel safe from the moment she walked through the door. Emma's first few weeks with the Morrisons were challenging. She had nightmares almost every night, waking up screaming and confused about where she was. She was afraid to eat too much food, worried that she would be punished for taking more than her share. Simple kindnesses, like Helen bringing her a glass of milk before bed, made Emma cry because she wasn't used to such gentle treatment. Jack visited Emma every day, bringing small gifts and slowly building her trust. He brought her books about horses and told her stories about life on his ranch. Emma began to look forward to his visits, and gradually, her shy smiles became more frequent. Meanwhile, the police investigation into Marcus and Vera's treatment of Emma moved forward quickly. When officers searched the farm, they found the corn crib exactly as Jack had described, complete with rope marks and evidence of Emma's imprisonment. Neighbors who were interviewed admitted they had sometimes heard a child crying, but had assumed it was normal childhood tears. Marcus was arrested and charged with multiple counts of child abuse, false imprisonment, and endangerment. Vera was charged as an accessory for failing to protect Emma and for lying to the social worker during her visit. Both faced serious prison sentences. The case made headlines in the local newspaper, and the community was shocked to learn what had been happening so close to their homes. Many people expressed regret that they hadn't noticed the signs or done more to help Emma sooner. After 6 weeks of background checks, home inspections, and interviews, Jack was approved as Emma's foster parent. The day he came to pick her up from the Morrisons was one of the happiest days of Emma's life. She had packed her few belongings in a small suitcase, including a stuffed horse that Helen Morrison had given her. Jack's ranch was like a dream come true for Emma. The house was simple but comfortable, with a big kitchen, a cozy living room, and a bedroom that Jack had specially prepared for her. The walls were painted a soft yellow color, and there was a window that looked out over the pastures where horses grazed peacefully. Emma's bedroom had something she had never possessed before, a door that locked from the inside. Jack had installed the lock himself, understanding that Emma needed to feel completely safe in her own space. He explained to her that she never had to come out of her room if she didn't want to, and no one would ever force their way in. The first time Emma locked her bedroom door and realized she was truly safe, she cried tears of relief. For 2 years, she had never had control over her own body or space. Now she had a room that was entirely hers, with books and toys and a comfortable bed with soft blankets. Jack was patient and understanding as Emma adjusted to her new life. He never raised his voice, even when she accidentally broke something or made a mistake. When she had nightmares, he would sit outside her bedroom door and talk to her softly until she felt safe enough to go back to sleep. Slowly, Emma began to believe that this new life was real and permanent. She started school in town, where her teacher, Mrs. Anderson, worked extra hard to help her catch up academically. Emma was bright and eager to learn, and her grades improved quickly as she gained confidence. The other children at school were curious about Emma at first, but her sweet nature and quiet strength soon won her friends. She discovered that she loved reading, especially stories about animals and adventures. Jack made sure she had plenty of books and encouraged her to read to him in the evenings. One of Emma's greatest joys was learning to care for Jack's horses. He taught her how to brush them, feed them, and eventually how to ride. There was something healing about working with the gentle animals, and Emma found that when she was with the horses, the bad memories seemed further away. Jack's neighbors and friends embraced Emma warmly, understanding what she had been through and wanting to help her heal. The local church organized a welcome party for her, complete with cake and games. For the first time in her life, Emma felt like she belonged to a community of people who cared about her. As months passed, Emma grew stronger and happier. The scared, thin little girl who had been rescued from the corn crib gradually transformed into a confident, smiling child. She gained healthy weight, her hair grew shiny and long, and, most importantly, the fear left her eyes. Jack began the process of adopting Emma permanently, and on her 10th birthday, the adoption was finalized. Emma Sullivan, she had taken Jack's last name, stood in the courtroom wearing a pretty blue dress and holding Jack's hand as the judge made their family official. "Emma," the judge said with a warm smile, "you now have a daddy who will love and protect you for the rest of your life." Emma looked up at Jack with tears of joy in her eyes. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered. Jack knelt down to her level and hugged her tight. "Thank you for trusting me," he replied. "You saved yourself by being brave enough to accept help." The trial of Marcus and Vera took place several months later. Emma testified via video link, with Jack and a child advocate supporting her through the process. Her testimony was heartbreaking but powerful, and it helped ensure that Marcus received a 15-year prison sentence while Vera received 5 years. Emma never had to see them again, but she did write a letter to the court that was read during their sentencing. In it, she forgave them for what they had done to her, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because she didn't want to carry anger in her heart anymore. As Emma grew older, she never forgot where she came from or what she had survived. Her experience taught her to recognize suffering in others and to speak up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. She volunteered at local animal shelters and eventually became involved in programs that helped other children who had experienced abuse. Emma went on to excel in school and eventually became a veterinarian, inspired by her love for animals and her desire to heal creatures who had been hurt. She specialized in treating animals that had been abused or neglected, bringing the same patience and understanding to her work that Jack had shown her. Jack lived to see Emma graduate from veterinary school, get married to a kind man who treated her with love and respect, and welcome her first child, a daughter she named Hope. As Jack held his granddaughter for the first time, he reflected on how one act of courage and compassion had changed 2 lives forever. Emma's story became an inspiration to many people in their community and beyond. Her transformation from a terrified, abused child to a confident, successful woman showed the power of love, patience, and the belief that every child deserves safety and care. The old farm where Emma had suffered was eventually sold and torn down. In its place, a small park was built with a playground and picnic area. A plaque near the entrance reads, "In memory of all children who have suffered in silence, and in honor of those who choose to speak up and make a difference." Emma still lives near Jack's ranch, now running her own veterinary practice and raising her children in the same community that welcomed her so many years ago. She often tells her own children the story of how Grandpa Jack rescued her, teaching them about courage, kindness, and the importance of helping others who need protection. The corn crib where Emma spent so many terrifying hours is long gone, but its memory serves as a reminder of how quickly someone's life can change when the right person decides to act. Emma's rescue was not just about one man saving one child. It was about an entire community learning to see the signs of abuse and choosing to protect their most vulnerable members. Today, Emma is living proof that with love, patience, and support, children can heal from even the darkest experiences. Her laughter fills Jack's house during family gatherings, and her success in life stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of one person's decision to care.